Hello, we're back for another round of patron questions. So Adrian is grappling with sort of the juncture between the events of life and the creation of an experience. How it is that we frame the events of our lives and how those frames actually can interact with our attempts to reframe and intervene. So she's encountering a situation where there's life going on and it's getting passed through some frame and being used to build up some experience, and that experience is not great. Like, oh, okay, the realization that I'm actually viewing life through a frame that's not serving my well-being. Like, these events don't necessarily have to come together to form some negative, unpleasant experience. I can have a different experience with the same events going on in the world, and then running into the fact that the frame of mind from which I'm currently experiencing the world actually contains information that is making it difficult for me to reframe this situation. My current mindset seems to exclude the possibility of bringing a different mindset to these events. Which is a real pain in the butt, because it's the realization that a tremendous amount of what we experience is actually what we brought in rather than what is going on in the world. There's only a very loose coupling between the events of the world and the experiences that we have, and that most of it comes from our own frame of mind, and that those frames can actually, have reference to mental states within them, of course, because we're part of the world, right? So of course our brain models that. So what are we to do? This is a situation where we have to sort of go looking for a weird experience, ultimately, because we are trained in a very continuous process of mental evolution, right? This happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. We have a train of thought that is continuous, right? Each thing links up neatly to the one before it. So we start off at A, we go through B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, etc. And that's the way that our experience proceeds. That is not the only possible mode. It is possible to introduce some pretty profound discontinuities in our cognitive activity, and in fact to simply throw away an entire frame and supplant it with something that is preferable. So it actually doesn't matter what the narratives that are currently dominating your experience right now say about what is possible for you. The set of possible experiences, the possible sort of cognitive activity for subsequent moments is much, 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 much larger than we're accustomed to thinking of. But that faculty of mind that introduces those sorts of discontinuities, we're generally not particularly familiar with. So you're going to have to go looking. You have to go into your meditation practice and just be on the lookout for how does my mental state evolve? Where do jumps occur? What's going on when I rapidly transition from one experience to another experience? At first, that's going to probably be something that happens more out in deep time in meditation. When you've been at it for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour even, you're cruising along and all of a sudden, whoa, this is different. All right. And it may require some sort of ritualization to see if you can trigger that experience by sort of going through motions similar to the motions you went through the last time you encountered it. But eventually you get accustomed to it. You can forge stronger connections to the part of your mind that is capable of doing that. And then you can just invoke it and I am deep in, whatever mire has taken hold in my experience, and then, wait a minute, no, this sucks. Boom! I'm somewhere else completely. That is a possibility. It is one of those things where that's a research program. Once you're made aware that that's possible, you have to go looking for it, and you have to put in a hell of a lot of skull sweat to get to the point where, you know, you can just look for it and there it is. The sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism, Huineng, said something to the effect of that no matter what's going on, wisdom is only a hair's breadth away. And I think that that's what's being pointed at. I don't know. I'll have to look up the exact quotation at some point to find my copy of the Platform Sutra. But that was very helpful to me when I was studying this sort of stuff initially. It's just a pointer to the fact that there isn't a process that you have to go through. There aren't a sequence of steps that you have to undertake to get out of a mental frame that seems to foreclose the possibility of moving towards a more positive, life-affirming experience. You can just, in a completely instantaneous, discontinuous fashion, stop and be having a different experience. That is something that the human mind is capable of for whatever reason. It's just one of those nice faculties that's laying around unused. The brain's capable of doing all sorts of nice things that we don't generally consciously, volitionally do. But those levers are available to us. We have to find those levers. We have to go like, oh, this is the time. Pull the lever and drop into a completely different experience. So, you know, as with all things with these sorts of practices, it takes a lot of work and it can't actually be explained in a meaningful sense. Like we don't have the linguistic apparatus to describe in fine-grained detail how to go about finding that. So I have to go on a little journey, set up a little research program. But simply being aware that there is this situation, right, that I am perceiving the world in a certain way, that a huge percentage of that is actually optional, that it may be the case that the way that I'm perceiving the world right now forecloses on a bunch of other options, and that foreclosure does not actually have to bind me. If I believe in the sort of train of thought, step-by-step process of the unfolding of one's cognitive activity, then I am really bound, right? Because this whole context is loaded up, and there just isn't a sequence of steps from where I am now to where I want to be that's really achievable. And so if I believe that I have to take a sequence of steps to get to where I want to be, then yeah, it's not going to work. But I don't. I could just jump to exactly where I want to be at any moment. Which is pretty fun. and once you have that, once you get to the point where you can just realize like, oh, this isn't that great, I'm going to go do something else, then things get a lot easier because we're not engaged in a practice of trying to get out of a miserable state with the same mind that brought us to that state, which is what it really is to believe that you have to take this step-by-step process through the frame that's currently making you miserable to get to a frame that's going to support you in being a happy human being.